Hello again. This is Jeremy, and this is chess time. I'm going to be doing a game, Alekine Alexander versus Rosettavan Lee, the first. And what it is, it was played in Moscow, 1907. It's um, I'll show you what it is. It was a really good game. It was a Scotch Gambit. That's what I was thinking of. And it starts out E4, E5, F3, knight F3, knight C6, and then it goes D4, and E takes D4, knight takes D4, and then it goes F6. There's a couple of varieties you can do. You can either take the knight on C6, the black knight, or you can play it to B3. Sometimes people will, rather than play their knight out down there, they'll actually play the knight to C3. The reason is to defend the E4 pawn for white. Because if you notice right here, the pawn is getting attacked by the knight at F6. So he has to defend with, well, he could defend with bishop. Sometimes what they do, with the knight, sometimes they attack, they take the knight takes knight up here, and that's exactly what they do in a game, but the majority of the time they'll play knight to c3, protecting their e4 pawn. So, but this is 1907, so totally different era. But you know, it's still the same chess. It's chess, but this is fun. I really like this game. I want to share it with you. Okay, let's continue on. Here go. Alekine does knight takes c6. Black plays b takes c6. The reason is if he plays d takes c6, he could trade queens, and then black wouldn't be able to castle, and that's a disadvantage. So it's better to do that. But the problem with taking with the pawn is it blocks in, if you wanted to fianchetto your bishop, it blocks in the fianchetto bishop, and also it doubles the pawns. But you're saying there's three pawns here, yes. But if so, let's say he plays D5, and then white plays E5. Now he has a problem. He has a backward pawn, and he has a weakness at the C6 square, the C6 pawn right here. White plays bishop to D3, protecting the pawn. He could play knight takes, not knight takes, sorry, knight to c3, also protecting the e4 pawn. But the reason that I think Alekine might have played the bishop up to d3 was, in my opinion, he's protecting the pawn, and also he gives the king the ability to castle. So that's an advantage. But sometimes, you know, it's also a really good move, because if knight goes to c3, it blocks in the c2 pawn. So because then a bishop to d3 is really good, because it allows you to push if you want the c pawn, maybe start a pawn onslaught on the queen side up here. It all depends. So we're going to go back to the game now. Okay. Black plays d5, like I was talking about. The d5. White could maybe play e5, attacking the knight, drawing it back. The knight can't go to g4 because the queen's guarding it. It can't go to h5 because the queen's guarding it. So what it usually does, so that it doesn't avoid castling, make the king so he can't castle, it'll go back to d7. But the problem with that is it blocks in his bishop. If he moves his knight back to d7, The bishop the knight would either have to go right here, it'd have to go bang bang, or the bishop could go to b7, preparing the pawn push c6 to c5. But at the moment, this is a totally, like I said, totally different era. This is like trade era. So you'll get to see what Alekhine does. It's a brilliant game, though, by the way. He plays e takes d5. Black plays c takes d5, thinking, oh yeah, my double pawns are okay. I don't have them anymore. I have two pawns that are connected, c and my d pawns. But what he has is a weakness at the a7 pawn. True, it's guarded by a rook, but think about it. It has to be guarded by a powerful piece that's worth 5 pawns. So keep that in mind. Black castles, getting his king to safety. Also, later, if black neglects to move his bishop out to e7, black can play rook to e1, attacking his king with check. It all depends, and well, you know, these guys are grandmasters. Black's not going to fall for that trick, so he plays the smart and intelligent move, bishop to e7, so that next move he can castle. But Alekhine doesn't take any time at all. He develops another piece, knight c6. Now black castles and allows Alekhine another developing move, g5, bishop to g5, pinning the bishop, the knight to the bishop. All Alekhine needs to do is bring a rook over, maybe, or maybe he can even move the bishop, the light squared bishop, back to e2 and allow the attack on the knight right here. He can play knight takes. But the problem with that is, the weakness about moving the bishop is, even if he did play knight takes, he could play knight takes the d4 pawn, and I mean d5 pawn. But our friend, the computer machine, says that the bishop at c8 would actually do better at g4. But this is what actually black plays. It's an okay move. I'm just taking it back for a second. Black's move. I believe what the machine says. This would be a better move. But there is a disadvantage to that move. The disadvantage is that he could bring his bishop back to e2, and then but like you're thinking, white and there would not, you would have a kind of issue with the pawn at d5 pushing to d4, attacking our knight. And our friend, of course, see, it's wanting us to play g4, but we'll get back to what actually happened in the game. Okay, c6. White plays queen to f3. Well, it's that's an interesting move. Has a couple ideas. First of all, develops the queen, hooks the two rooks up. But the problem with that move is the bishop at c8 could get a free development tempo at g4. So, but it also has an advantage of attacking the pawn, the d5 pawn, but it is right now defended. So it's kind of an interesting move, and maybe somehow if he trades, he can move his queen up to h5. You know, maybe. It's interesting, but Alekhine, of course, you know, he's a brilliant player. He had something in mind totally that sometimes we even kind of miss. So don't worry if you miss some of the combinations that Alekhine does. This is for enjoyment and for learning time. So just have fun, kick back, watch, enjoy, and learn. Okay, now it's black's turn. Black plays g4, and you're thinking, whoa, is it protected? Yeah, it's protected by this knight right here. And the queen has to move. But, the queen, Alekhine, like our computer friend said, the queen could move up to f4, attacking the bishop, and then later on, he could play, like our friend says, maybe the next move after black moves somewhere. Not exactly sure, because I know Alekhine might not have went into this variation. Maybe move the knight somewhere and then take the bishop, but who would do that? He'd probably drop his bishop back to maybe d7, but maybe e6. It all depends. But this is what Alekhine moves. That. What you're seeing with these arrows are our computer friend. Okay, he plays Alekhine. Brilliant move. G3 has a threat of bishop takes knight, and then queen takes, winning a whole piece of bishop. That's brilliant. But this is either a force. This is a kind of, like I said, he can bring his bishop back to e6. Sometimes he may bring his bishop back to h5. They all have their drawbacks. Like our computer friend says, you could do queen there, but the problem is, like we're saying, the threat is still there. Bishop takes knight, bishop takes, queen takes, winning a whole piece. So don't forget that variation. And this is what black does. He drops his bishop back to h5. Still keeping the threat of the diagonal, keeping the bishop open, for the diagonal down the light squares. Also still attacking the knight, pinning it to the queen. Maybe, yeah, us normal players, we're still in the learning experience time. Might play later on a rook out, and attacking his bishop maybe. Or maybe we may move the knight, but you want to move these two rooks. You want to get them going. Okay, what Alekhine does, which is a brilliant move, he's ready to play again. Bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop, winning a whole piece. It's just brilliant. Okay, and our computer friend says to play bishop to e6. D6. Yeah, that may work. There's still Alekhine maybe can drop his queen back, still keeping the pressure. So he's not out of the woods yet. You know what I mean? Because what would happen is, let's say when the bishop dropped it back, let's say black moved like rook to e8. You can play bishop takes knight, queen takes, and then he doubles his pawns along the f file, and he can move his rook up, bring some pressure up. With grandmasters, this is bad when you open up your king pawn file. So that's why black moves this move, bishop to g6. He gets out of all the troubles, because if he plays bishop, now there's no threat of losing the light squared bishop. This is a great move when Alekhine moves. Watch, bishop takes, and then black plays. I gotta move it back. Apology for that. I wanted to explain. Some people would take with f, the f pawn. Like our computer friend says, taking with the h-pawn's better, because remember, we're taught in gameplay for you to take with the h-pawn. Take towards the center. Remember that. Towards the center. I know I emphasize that a lot, but it's important. And that's what black does. Alekhine, another brilliant move. A1 to A1 to D1. He's getting ready for maybe moving the knight down and then he can push the pawn, the c pawn, opening up the position in the center. There's a lot of varieties. Our computer friend says to move the bishop to d6, attacking the queen. Yeah, there's some validity to that. You know, you're removing the queen, but what did the bishop leave behind? The bishop left behind, again, the pin of the queen. Because let's say it moves over here. Bring the queen back, there's still a pin there. So always remember that. Watch for the pins. And the queen could even drop back to this whole E file, somewhere along the E file, keeping the pressure. Well, I know you're probably thinking the rook could come to E8, correct? So Alekhine had all this going on in his head already. So and he made the best move, which is Black made this move. Sorry, he played like our computer friend said, bishop to d6, attacking the queen. Alekhine, like we were talking about, dropped his knight back to d4, still keeping the pressure. Remember, if he makes a foolish move or something, or maybe queen over here, and he could play knight, bishop takes. But the problem is, it leaves open the bishop takes pawn, like our friend, or like our computer friend says, queen to b8. Then it supports a battery to h2, giving check. Not only just taking a pawn, but giving check. So we got to watch out for that. Alekhine, I know, had all that in his head. So you got to watch. This is great. See, and then wow. Yikes. I guess you can do that, but like our computer friend said, bishop takes knight would develop into pawn takes, queen takes, and again bishop takes pawn at h2, giving check. So they'd both have pawns, but the king would be on the h file. The pawn maybe double. Later on, he can move this pawn up here, king over checking, maybe even sacrificing some pieces. Everything's in the air right now, but black does have, I'm going to just step back for a second and show you. Black has two pawn islands, one on the queen side and one on the king side that haven't moved. So black has to be ready for whatever happens with these pawn pushes. He not only has to worry about the pieces, the rook at f8 and the rook at a8. And if you notice, Alekhine has more mobility, more development. He's got everything is going towards what he wants. His plan is being executed to perfection almost. Okay. He plays queen to h4. Brilliant move. He's protecting the h2 pawn, also still keeping the threat of bishop takes knight, and maybe he could do a lift to d3, slide it over to h3, and then having a threat of a mate attack down the file, the h file. Everything's in the air. And black had to think about all this. His pawns are pitiful in some areas, people would say. He's got an isolated pawn over here that later on could be a threat because he has to keep his rook here to protect it. But I see how he even has a pawn. He has a kind of a considered a pawn majority on the king side because these pawns aren't really highly looked upon. And what he could do, like our computer friend says, black could move his rook over to b8, threatening the b2 pawn. But that could be parried pretty good by just playing b3, moving the knight into the attack. He's got black has a lot of pieces on the queen side. There's a belief like keto that says if you have an imbalance in a position, you should attack on the side that has the imbalance, the side that is weak. And it's not keto is really interesting. It's all about drawbacks. You don't use your you don't block your opponent. You use his energy against him. And so we'll get back to black, what black moves. He moves knight back to h2. An interesting move. He's attacking the bishop. He also has the threat maybe of pushing the pawn to you know f5. I mean f6, attacking the bishop. Then he can march his king up here, push the rook over. There's a lot of stuff going in the air right now, a lot of maneuvers that could happen. So you have to always remember that moves do have drawbacks. Like the knight, you know how the phrase goes, "Knight on a rim is grim." This is the truth, because look, the knight's on the rim. Yes, it's attacking the bishop, but it's not what we would say in an ideal spot. The ideal spot would be in the center, right here. Ding, ding, ding. That's where it wants, because it can attack 8 squares at one time. This one could only attack 1, 2, 3, 4. It can only attack, 1, 2, and 3 squares. And Alekhine sees what's going on and he drops it back because he doesn't want to lose his bishop. Black's in trouble. He sees that his knight, like we're saying in keto, he's totally off balance. He's on the queen side. This whole area from here over is considered the queen side. These files and ranks from E to F to G and H are considered the king side. And if you notice, the majority of his pieces are on the queen side. But he should bring over his pieces black. Alekhine's gonna punish him. He's gonna take advantage of his imbalance in piece positions. So watch and see. Black plays F5. Again, weakening his G6 pawn. G6. And he blocked his knight has no square to go here, because if the knight goes here, the bishop takes it and there's no problem. It can't go here. It could go here, maybe. But if the king moves, he's in a problem. Well, watch and see. I'll show you. Pawn up. That's a great move. Stopping the push of his kingside pawns. Like he could push G6 to G5, attacking the queen, making the queen move, getting maybe back, like we're saying, moving his queen pieces back into the fray. Alekhine sees that, so he plays F4, stopping all threats of anything happening like that. Remember, black still has his pieces on the queen side. He only has 2 pieces really defending his king. True, you'd probably say, what about the bishop and the queen battery? But look at the F4 pawn. It shuts down both pieces. With one move, Alekhine shut down both 2 pieces. The queen and the bishop, really powerful pieces in open games. The queen and the bishop are. But that's an amazing move. Okay, let's go on to see what black does. Black he's trying to use too much attack power right now. He's trying to rebuild these. He's going to bring his rooks. He's trying to bring his rooks over to the king side to defend. And he's also thinking, if I move my rook to h8, I can move my knight. And look, it's attacking the queen. I guess I would say that whoop-de-doo, because what the queen can move, and he's still in a problem here. He has no moves for his bishop or queen. His king is almost stuck in the center of the board. It's gonna get in big problem if this rook moves over to e1, and then it's in big trouble. We'll watch and see what happens. The bishop moves. It's attacking the pawn, also threatening to do queen takes knight, like our computer friend is saying, because if it does take queen takes knight, even if he tries to play rook over to h8, he can move his queen over checking, and he's going to be in a deep problem with his pieces, because he'd have to move down, queen takes, rook over here, he'd have to move up, lose both of his rooks, and it would be a total resignable position. But let's see what black does. Black moves, he has to. He's set himself up for this. He has to finish his plan. So he plays rook to h1. And let's see what white does. Like we said, he's playing rook to e1. This is great chess. He's playing queen to, knight to f6, unleashing the rook on the queen. This is a beautiful move that Alekhine plays. He at g5. Saying to the rook, come on down, come down. I want you to. I want to pull you in. I want to use your energy against you. He would trap a rook, and also he could trap the knight here too, because he could play pawn takes knight, and he could a lot of stuff's in the air. Well, look, this is a big area right here. It's barricading off his pieces on the queen side. He drops his knight back, trying to barricade the queen in with the rook coming here. Queen will get trapped, but that ain't happened. This is Alekhine. This is Alekhine, baby. You don't trap Alekhine. He plays king. He's going to play king takes rook. He has to play king takes rook, because if he does some other weird move, the queen, the rook, like our friend said, could come over and take the pawn, or maybe even the queen could snap off the pawn, and the king would have to go back to g8. f8, sorry, and then he could play queen takes pawn, and that would be checkmate. So this is a forced move. King takes, bishop, queen takes check. King moves to d7. That's another check, but also attacking the knight. Then he moves back. His king moves back. Snaps off the knight. Any attack that was going to happen was shut down. Remember, the knight was supporting an attack here. No more. He's in trouble. Black's in big trouble. His king's out in the open. It's going to get smashed. He tries to protect the pawn, like our computer friend was saying, the weakness of the pawn. Remember, we were wondering what these pushes were? Remember when he had the pawn here and the pawn here, pawn here and pawn here? The weakness when he opened this position up was his isolated pawn at g7. He moves his rook, Alekhine. He's moving in for the kill. Watch and see. Black tries to trade queens. Ain't happening. Plays check. King moves. You're thinking, bishop, he's okay. He's not okay. Watch and see. Rook up to e3. You're thinking, what in the world's that move for? It's going to be very important later on. Watch. He moves his king over. Knight goes to A4. Now you see what the whole thing was about. The pawn B3. Alekhine saw 3 or 4 moves down that this would be a humongous square that would hurt the queen big time. So he plays rook over trying to trade. Alekhine goes, no way, not here. I want your king and I'm taking it. Black has to move. He plays his queen down to G3. Beautiful play, protecting the pawn at E1. The rook can't do any funky, checks or anything. He can't even play a bishop here because the pawn is protecting the queen from anything, and there's no threat of the H2 from the rook, a pin or anything. So black's stuck, and if we notice, look at this. Remember how black was on the king side and all of his imbalance was on the queen side? Remember over here? Now Alekhine walked him over to the queen side, and his whole imbalance is on the king side. Yeah, he's got one piece on the queen side, the queen itself. That's it. The bishop locks in his knight at H8, and there's no coordination with the queen and the bishop. No, the queen and the rook. So it's over. Watch and see it. This is lovely. Rook. Bing. Yeah, he's trying to double. Yeah, right. Watch this. Boom. Ain't happening, boy. He shut him down with one move, the bishop. It's over. He plays pawn push. I'm just taking that move back for a second. Black doesn't really have any good moves. I think his best move, like our computer friend is saying, is that pawn push because it threatens the knight. Oh, yeah, you don't think the Alekhine's not going to see that? But black doesn't anyways. This is only his best move out of everything. Then he plays rook up. Don't think so. You ain't trading with my knight. He plays rook over, seeing like our computer friend said. He excuse me. Just a little too excited there. He would play knight. Knight takes if the rook wouldn't have came over, and it would have forked the queen and the rook, and one of them would perish. Excuse me. Then what happens? Alekhine pushes his pawn. Seeing that there's a weakness right here, he could play pawn takes, attacking the rook. Everything's in the air. This is Alekhine, folks. It's amazing moves that he does. He just forked the queen and the king. Do you see that? And he's even willing to give up a knight for a checkmate. Remember, it's not about material. It's about the king itself. The king moves. He's trying to take the knight, but this is Alekhine, folks. Look, another beautiful move. His queen was doing nothing on the king. His queen was doing, nothing on the queen side. It was blocked in by these pawns. All of a sudden, watch this. Her Majesty comes into power, and it's basically over. Black makes a mistake. He moves right here, like our computer friend said. I don't know if there was any other good move. I think that was the best because it protects now that I look at it, protects the pawn on A6, also attacking a pawn. But Alekhine doesn't care about that. All he cares about is the check. The mate. And he goes back. He's like, okay, let's do this. Because he also unleashes the queen for a check right here. Next move would be checkmate. And the queen moves back here. Our computer friend was correct. This is actually a better spot. It protects the pawn here. It protects from a checkmate, and it also threatens checkmate down here. So, but the black Rosanovith saw that he was scared, and when you're scared, you make moves that aren't the best. And he made this was a blunder right here. In my opinion, that was a total blunder. That was the move that lost the entire game. He plays queen up. See? Right there. Right there. The reason, I'm going to go back just a couple moves. The reason that he should have played, I'm sorry, I just want to go back to where the queen was right here. The reason he, like our computer friend said, should go to A5 is this reason. Let's say he plays check right up here. He plays check. He can move his bishop down, maybe even a rook down, maybe even escaping down. This is a better move. But we'll go back to the position where Alekhine checks him on F7. He goes to A8 forced. I guess that what Black was thinking is that Alekhine was going to checkmate him anyways. But the reason that's a blunder is like our computer friend said. Alekhine saw that pawn takes. There's no way he can save his king from checkmating, from getting checkmated, because his queen can't move. He's going to lose a queen. He's for nothing, and he's going to get checkmated on the next move anyways. So this move wins the game. And man, I gotta say, watching this truly is a game for the ages, man. This is like, ay. If only everybody can play like Alekhine, you know. But Alekhine plays the way he plays, and my friends, that you will find a way that you play good at. And when you find that, you'll get better and better at playing. But this is Alekhine's game. Alekhine, Alexander versus Rosetavas Lee. And this is Jeremy with Chess Time. Enjoy. God bless. And we'll see you next time on Chess Time.